This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. 7 Little Australians by Ethel Turner. Chapter 17. Cattle Drafting at Yarrahappini. To wheel the wild scrub cattle at the yard, with a running fire of stockwhip and a fiery run of hoofs. Pip could hardly sleep one night, a month after their arrival, for thinking of the cattle drafting that was on the programme for the morrow. He had been casting about for some fresh occupation, for he was a boy to whom variety was the salt of life. At first he had been certain he could never tire of shooting rabbits. Mr. Hassel had given him the jolliest little stunner of a gun, and Tettawonga had gone out with him the first day, and had been very scornful about his enthusiasm when he shot too. "Ah, good gun do. Plenty fellow rabbit long as scrub, budgery way north, budgery way south, budgery way everywhere. But good barbed wire fence do, but good poison do, bah!" But Pip was not to be discouraged, and really thought he had done great good to the Yarrahappini estate by shooting these 2 soft, fleet brown things. He took them home and displayed them proudly to the girls, cleaned his perfectly clean gun, and sallied forth the next day. Tettawonga took his pipe from between his lips when he saw him again, and laughed, a loud cackling laugh that made Pip flush with anger. "Kimbricky and Kimbricky too, rabbity, catty, curry now. Boy come long with cob on gun, rabbit directly go, burry, grouse grow, sheep get fat, ha ha hee. Tomorrow and tomorrow too, rabbit he go away quickly now. Boy come along with big gun, rabbit he afraid directly, go under the ground." Pip understood his mixed English enough to know he was making fun of him, and told him wrathfully to shut up for a Dutch idiot. Then he shouldered the gun he was so immeasurably proud of, and went off the other side of the barbed wire fence, where was the happy hunting ground of the little rodent that would not allow Mr. Hassel to grow rich. He shot 5 that day, 4 the next, 7 the next, but after a time he voted it slow, and went after gillbirds with more enjoyment, but less certainly of a bag. Every day was filled to the brim with enjoyment, and but for the intense heat that first month at Yarrahappini would have been one of absolute contentment and happiness. And now there was the cattle drafting. Breakfast was very early the morning of the great event. By 5:30 it was almost over, and Pip, in a fever of restlessness, was telling Mr. Hassel he was sure they would be late and miss it. Judy had pleaded hard to be allowed to go, but everyone said it was out of the question. Indeed, it was doubted if it were wise to allow Pip to face the danger that is inseparable with the drafting of the wilder kind of cattle that had been driven from great distances. But he had forcibly carried the day, and dressed himself up in so businesslike a way that Mr. Hassel had not the heart to refuse him. He came down to breakfast in a Crimean shirt and a pair of old serge trousers fastened round the waist with a leathern belt, in which an unsheathed bowie knife, freshly sharpened, was jauntily stuck. No persuasions would induce him either to wear a coat or sheath the knife. The grey was brought round to the veranda steps, with Mr. Hassel's own splendid horse. Mr. Gillett was there on a well-groomed roan. He had 3 stockwhips, 2 quite 16 feet long, the third shorter one which he presented to Pip. The boy's face glowed. "Hurrah, Fizz!" he said, standing up in his saddle and brandishing it round his head. "What did you give to change places?" He dug his heels into the animal's sides and went helter-skelter at a wild gallop down the hill. It was 1.5 miles to the cattle yards, and here was the strongest excitement. Pip could not think where all the men had sprung from. There were some 20 or 30 of them, stockmen, shearers on the wallaby, as their parlance expressed lack of employment, 2 aboriginals, exclusive of Tettawonga, who was smoking and looking on with sleepy enjoyment, and several other of the station hands. In the first yard there were 500 cattle that had been driven there the night before, and that just now presented the appearance of a sea of wildly lashing tails and horns. Such horns! Great branching, terrific-looking things that they gored and fought each other madly with, seeing they could not get to the common enemy outside. Just for the first moment or two, Pip felt a little disinclined to quit the stronghold of his horse's back. The thunder of hoofs and horns, the wild charges made by the desperate animals against the fence, made him expect to see it come crashing down every minute. But everybody else had gone to Cockatoo, to sit on the top rail of the enclosure and look down at the maddened creatures, so at length he fastened his bridle to a tree and proceeded gingerly to follow their example. At a sudden signal from Mr. Hassel, the men dropped down inside, half along one side and half the other. The object was to get 100 or 2 of the cattle into the forcing yard adjoining, the gate to which was wide open. Pip marvelled at the courage of the men. For a moment his heart had leapt to his mouth as bullock after bullock essayed to charge them. But the air resounded with cracks from the mighty stock whips and drafting sticks, and beast after beast retreated towards the centre, with its face dripping with blood. Then one huge black creature, with a bellow that seemed to shake the plain, made a wild rush to the gate, the whole herd at his heels. Like lightning the men made a line behind, shouting, yelling, cracking their whips to drive them onward. Pip stood up and hallooed, absolutely beside himself with excitement. Then he held his breath again. Mr. Hassel and one of the black boys were creeping cautiously up near the gateway through which the tumultuous stream of horns and backs was pouring. Half a dozen mighty blows from the men, and the last leader fell back for an instant, driving the multitude back behind him. In that second the two had slipped up the rails, and the herd was in 2 divisions. 2 lines of stockmen again, whip crackings, bellows, blood, horns, hide and heels in the air, and some 40 or 50 were secure in a 3rd yard, a long narrow place with a gate at the end leading into the final division. Pip learnt from Mr. Gillett the object of these divisions. Some of the beasts were almost worthless things, and had been assigned to a buyer for a couple of pounds a head, just for the horns, hides, and what might be got for the flesh. Others were prime fat creatures, ready for the butcher and Sydney market, and others again were splendid animals, of great value for prize and breeding purposes, and were to be made into a separate draft. The man at the last gateway was doing the all-important work of selecting. He was armed with a short, thick stick, and as the other men drove the animals down towards him, decided with lightning speed to which class they belonged. A heavy blow on the nose, a sharp, rapid series of them between the eyes, and the most violent brute plunged blindly whither the driver sent him. All the day work went on, and just as the great, hot, purple shadows began to fall across the plain, they secured the last rail. The battle was over, and the animals in approved divisions. Pip ate enough salt beef and damper to half kill him, drank more tea than he had ever disposed of at one sitting in all his 14 years, swung himself into his saddle in close imitation of the oldest stockman, and thought if only he could have a black, evil-looking pipe like Tettawonga and the rest of the men, his happiness would be complete and his manhood attained. He reached home as tired as a dozen dogs and a dingo, and entertained his sisters and Bunty with a graphic account of the day's proceedings, dwelling lengthily on his own prowess and the manifold perils he had escaped. The next day both Esther and Judy rode with the others to the yards to see the departures. The best of the contingent, which Mr. Hassel had only wanted to separate, not to sell, were driven out through the gate and away to their old fields and pastures stale. The wasters, some 150 of them, with half a dozen stockmen mounted on the best horses of the place told off for them, were released from their enclosure in a state of frenzied desperation, and, with much cracking of whips and yells, mustered into a herd and driven across the plain in the direction of the road. And some hour or 2 later the best beef lot were driven forth, and quiet reigned at Yarrahappini once more. During the 2 days of excitement the children all decided upon their future professions, which were all to be of a pastoral nature. Pip was going to be a stockman, and brand and draft cattle all the days of his life. Judy was going to be his aide-de-camp, provided he let her stay in the saddle, and provided her with a whip just as long as his own. Meg thought she should like to marry the richest squatter in Australia, and have the governor and the premier come up for shooting and things, and give balls to which all the people within 100 miles would come. Nell decided she would make soap and candles, coloured as well as plain, when she arrived at years of discretion, and Baby inclined to keeping paddocks full of pet lambs that never grew into sheep. Bunty did not wax enthusiastic over any of the ideas. "I'd rather be like Mr. Gillett," he said, and his eyes looked dreamy. "Poh, no books and figures for me. Give me a run of saltbush country and a few thousand sheep," said Pip. "Hear, hear," chimed in Judy. "Stupids," said Bunty in a voice of great scorn. "Doesn't Mr. Gillett keep the store keys? Just think of those currants and figs." End of chapter 17. Chapter 18. The picnic at Crangy Bartoo. Esther had gone to a ball. not in a dress of delicate colour with great puffed sleeves, and a dazzling neck bare and beautiful under its wraps, not through the darkness to a blaze of lights and swinging music. She had gone in the broad light of the morning in a holland suit with a blue Henley shirt, a sailor hat and a gossamer. Under the front buggy seat where Mr. Hassel sat was a box containing a beautiful gown, all daffodil silk and delicate wavelets of chiffon, and there were daffodil shoes and stockings, a plume fan in a hat box on her knee, and a lovely trained white underskirt with billowy frills of torchon, the very sight of which made Meg wild to be grown up. But none of these things were to be donned for many an hour yet. The ball was a neat little matter of 55 miles away, across country, so she had to start tolerably early, of course, in order to have comfortable time to titivate, as Pip expressed it. The children, as compensation for having no part in this pleasure, were to have a very out-of-the-way kind of picnic all to themselves. In the first place, the picnic ground was 14 miles away. In the second, the journey was to be made not in everyday buggies or on commonplace horses, but on a dray drawn by a team of 12 yoked bullocks. A boundary rider had reported that a magnificent blue gum that they had long called King Corrie had been blown down during a violent gale, and Mr. Hassel immediately declared that, whatever the trouble, it must be brought for the foundation of a kind of dam across the creek at Crangybar 2, the picnic spot. The fallen bush monarch lay 20 miles away from the station and 6 beyond the place chosen for the picnic, so it was arranged the trolley should carry the party for the 14 miles, leave them to picnic, go forward for the tree, bring it back, and deposit it near the creek ready for future operations, and bring the children back in the cool of the evening. But for escorting his daughter to the ball, Mr. Hassel would have gone himself to the place and seen about it in person. As it was, he placed the great trolley in the charge of 4 men, with instructions to pick up a couple of men from distant huts to help in the task. Crangybar 2, or Duckwater, as less prettily we should call it, was the name given to the head of the creek, which had scooped out the earth till it made itself a beautiful ravine just there, with precipitous rocks and boulders that the kangaroos skipped across and played hide-and-seek behind with hunters, and great towering blue gums and red gums that seemed to lose themselves in the blue sky canopy above. Tettawonga told of a bunyip that dwelt where the trickling water had made a pool, deep and beautiful, and delicate ferns had crept tenderly to fringe its edge, and blackwood and tea-trees grown up thick and strong for a girdle. The water-hen made a home there, the black swan built among the grass-like reeds, the wild duck made frequent dark zigzag lines against the sky. From the trees the bellbird, the coach-whip, the tawinga, the laughing jackass, the rifle-bird and regent filled the air with sound, if not with music. And the black snake, the brown snake, the whip, the diamond and the death adder glided gently among the fallen leaves and grasses, and held themselves in cheerful readiness for intruders. That was why a condition was attached to the freely granted picnic. Everyone might go, and go on the bullock dray, but the picnic was to take place above the ravine, and no one was to venture down, on pain of being instantly packed back to Sydney. How glad they were to unfold themselves and stretch out their arms and legs on the ground at last. No one had dreamt riding behind a bullock team could have been so flat, stale and unprofitable as it was after the first mile or two. Then the trolley continued its course. "I doubt if they will be back before the sun goes down, if they don't go a little quicker," Mr. Gillett said. "It is lunch-time now." They were in a great grassed paddock that at one end fell abruptly down to the ravine and swamplands known as Duckwater. A belt of great trees made a shade at one side, and along the other was the barbed wire fence that showed they had not got away from the Yarrahappini estate even yet. Higher up was the lonely bark hut of one of the stockmen. They went up in a body to speak to him before he joined the bullock team and to view his solitary dwelling. Just a small room it was, with a wide fireplace and chimney, where hung a frying pan, a billy, a cup and a spoon. There was a bunk in one corner with a couple of blue blankets on it, a deal table and one chair in the middle of the room. Over the fireplace hung a rough cupboard made out of a soap box and used to hold rations. From a nail in the low ceiling a mosquito net bag was suspended, and the buzzing flies around proclaimed that it held meat. The walls were papered with many a copy of the Illustrated Sydney News and the Town and Country Journal. There was a month-old Daily Telegraph lying on the chair where the owner had laid it down. A study in brown the stockman was. Brown dull eyes, brown dusty-looking hair, brown skin sun-dried and shrivelled, brown unkempt beard, brown trousers of corduroy and brown coat. His pipe was black, however, a clay that looked as if it had been smoked for 20 years. "Wouldn't you like to be nearer the homestead?" Meg asked. "Isn't it lonely?" "Not to mention," the brown man said to his pipe or his beard. "What do you do with yourself when you're not outside?" asked Pip. "Smoke," said the man. "But on Sundays and all through the evenings?" "Smoke," he said. "On Christmas Day," Baby said, pressing to see this strange man. "Then what does you do?" "Smoke," he said. Judy wanted to know how long he'd lived in the little place, and everyone was stricken dumb to hear that he had been there most of the time for 7 years. "Don't you ever forget how to talk?" she said in an awestruck voice. But he answered laconically to his beard that there was the cat. Baby had found it already under the kerosene tin that did duty for a bucket, and it had scratched her in 3 places. Brown like its master, it was evil-eyed, fiercely whiskered, thin as a rail. Still there was the affection of years between the two. Mr. Gillett told him of the squatter's wish that he should go with the other men and help with the tree. He pulled a brown hat over his brow and moved away towards the bullock dray, which had crept up the winding road by now to the hilltop. "Water in tub nearer than creek," he muttered to his pipe before he went, and they found his tub tank and gladly filled the billy ready for lunch. Mrs. Hassel's roast fowls and duck tasted well, even though they frizzled on the plates as if the sun were trying to finish their cooking, and the apple tarts and apricot turnovers vanished speedily, and of the fruit salad that came forth from 2 screw-top bottles not a teaspoonful remained to tell a tale. Mr. Gillett had brought materials for a damper by special request, and after lunch prepared to make it so they might have it for afternoon tea. "Phew!" said Judy. "Is that how you make it? You need not give me any." It certainly was manufactured with surprising celerity. Mr. Gillett merely tossed some flour from a bag out upon a plate, added a pinch of salt and some water, then he shaped it into a cake of dough and laid it on the ashes of the fire, covering it all over with the hot silver ash. "How dirty!" said Nell, elevating her pretty little nose. But when it was cooked and Mr. Gillett lifted it up and dusted the ash away, lo, it was high and light and beautifully white. So they ate it, and took mental marginal notes to make it in the paddocks at Misrule for each and every picnic to come. They piled up 2 plates of good things and put them in the brown man's cupboard, and Mr. Gillett laid his unread English papers on the chair near the cat. "That telegraph is a month old," he said deprecatingly, seeing Meg smile upon him her first smile that day. End of chapter 18.